Yo, how's it going guys? It's another day in the workshop and today's project is to convert this old road bike into a fixed gear. The bike is a nice old Peugeot Ventoux. I believe this model came out in '89. It's got Reynolds tubing and has a complete Shimano 105 group set, which is actually quite nice. The bike looks pretty tidy and pretty original for its age. It features these semi-horizontal dropouts like many road bikes from this era do. These dropouts give you the ability to tension the chain, which makes it a perfect contender for a fixed gear conversion. Everything on this bike seems to be running pretty well. Both wheels are true. It's shifting well, and like many other Peugeots, it features this brazing technique, which Peugeot call the direct brazing system. It gives the joins quite a nice seamless look. Paintwork is in pretty good condition. There is the odd paint chip, but nothing too bad. The seat post was loose when I picked it up, so yeah, at least I know it's not seized. When I was putting it into the stand, I noticed this unfortunate crack on the top part of the seat clamp, so I'll definitely have to sort that out. A few cobwebs and a little bit dusty. You can tell that this bike hasn't seen a lot of use, as the front rim still has a lot of the original anodizing on it. However, the rear has all worn off. It's got Shimano Biopace chainrings, which are oval. If you look at the gap here compared to the gap here, you can see that it's not quite perfectly round, and if you spin it, you can just see how oval the chainring is. These aren't really ideal for fixed gear or single speed setups, as they will change the chain tension as the crank rotates. So I'll be swapping those out. So I'll be removing a few parts like the chainrings, derailleurs, brakes and levers, wheels and shifters. The pedals are definitely usable as they do have straps, but I've got some proper track ones that I'll swap out. These are the wheels that I've picked up for it. They're just some generic track wheels, most likely Novatec hubs. Nice polished rims. They are flip-flop with fixed threading, and they came with this freewheel on the other side that I'm just going to leave on there. They are 120mm spacing, so I'll need to space them out once I've measured the frame. So yeah, let's get into it and start stripping the bike down. Might be a little bit hard to see, but this is actually a quite nice Shimano 600 chain. It's pretty sweet. So if you are planning to do a conversion like this, one thing is to make sure that the bike or the frame that you pick up has these semi-horizontal style dropouts like these, and not like these vertical dropouts here. When the wheel is fitted, it is sometimes hard to tell, but if you look closely, you should be able to tell the difference. If you do end up with vertical dropouts like these ones, it's not impossible to convert it into fixed gear. You will just need to get like an eccentric bottom bracket or something like that. But yeah, ideally you do want dropouts like these ones, as they are much easier and cheaper to convert. Check out this internal cabling. I didn't actually notice that. I don't see that too often on these old bikes. When these dropout screws bend like this, they tend to stop you from being able to remove them, but luckily with a bit of persuasion they bend back quite nicely. Whoa, check this out. That's definitely a first for me. It's a little wasp. Looks like he's been like frozen in time. Poor little guy must have been trapped in there for probably years. Kinda cool that he matches the paint job though. Might have to name this build in honor of this little guy. Quite nice to come across an original seat pin bolt that actually hasn't rusted. The bike is all stripped down now, so let's take a look. Surprisingly, the bottom bracket shell doesn't have any rust in there, so that's definitely a first for me. Little bit of tire rub. A few grazes on the chainstay, which is a little bit of a shame. Headset should clean up pretty nicely, and a few marks overall, but I think it's pretty tidy. And for anyone interested, the top tube measured at just over 53 centimeters. Now it's time to clean up the frame using some Juice Lube's bike cleaner. And there we go, cleaned up pretty nicely. I used a little bit of polish to remove some of the blemishes, but I think it's turned out quite well. Happy as. Moving on to the forks, there is a little rust spot here, so I'm just going to use the trusty auto sole polish. Much better. Time to clean up these headset bearings. Just going to use some degreaser. Give them a little bit of a scrub. And yeah, they've cleaned up quite nicely. There's a little bit of rust on the chrome parts of the headset, so I'll just give them a scrub with a wire brush, and that usually removes most of it. Now let's take a look at this seat post. So yeah, unfortunately it's definitely cracked. Bit of a shame. Funnily enough though, the last Peugeot I had had the same seat post and it cracked in the same spot. So it must be a little bit of a weak point. Anyway, let's clean up this post. Looks like the polish has brought back a little bit of the shine and it's removed those rust spots pretty nicely. So the post looks to be a 26.2. Not a super common size, but let's have a look and see if I have a spare. Alright guys, so I think I found the one. This post isn't actually the right size, but it looks like it has the same clamp design. And yeah, look at that. Looks like the exact perfect match. Two pretty different seat posts from different eras, but they have the same clamp design. Stoked. Moving on to the bars now, the plan is to keep the stem, but swap out the bars to some flat riser ones. So I'll need to remove one side of the tape and lever to get the stem off. So the stem's cleaned up nicely so far. There is some old paint stuck on here, so let's have a go at removing that. Looking much better. I'm actually surprised how nice this stem has turned out. It looks almost new. So here's a little tip if you do plan to change out handlebars like I'm doing here. Quill stems from this era can have a few different size bar clamps, so it's always good to measure the stem. And yeah, it looks like this is 25.4, which is perfect for me as the bars I'm using are the same size. You can also measure the old bars to check as well, but yeah, luckily they are 25.4, which matches the riser bars that I've got for it. For comparison, I'll show you this 3T stem that I have, and as you can see it measures at 26mm. Some other stems can actually be bigger at 26.2, so yeah, this can be a little bit confusing as 25.4 bars may seem to fit 26mm stems, but when you tighten it down it will actually over tighten and stress and potentially crack the aluminium, which obviously isn't ideal. So yeah, in that instance you can get small shims that will take up that 0.6mm difference, but yeah, if you are wanting to run 25.4mm flat or riser bars, you will ideally want to get a 25.4mm stem to match, or get some shims. So moving on to the crankset. Nice set of 105s. They look like they're 170mm length, which is the most common size for this era. Ideally on fixed gear you do want a shorter crank, especially on older road frames like this one here, as they will tend to have lower bottom bracket shells than traditional track frames. So yeah, pedal strikes can definitely be a thing. I usually run 165s, but in this instance I'm just going to reuse these 170s. So yeah, just something to note if you are doing this conversion. Check out the crank length, as long cranks make pedal strikes a lot more common, and yeah, they definitely aren't fun when they do happen. As I mentioned earlier, these chainrings are Shimano's Biopace. They are oval, as you can see here, and for that reason I'm going to be swapping them out. Now I have heard that some people have run these chainrings before, and I guess in some instances it may work out okay, but the oval part of the chainring will cause your chain tension to change, and yeah, I'm not a big fan of that. And I don't want to run that risk on a fixed gear, so yeah, I've got this 48 tooth chainring to swap out. And yeah, luckily these cranks are a pretty standard 130 BCD length, so there's plenty of single speed chainring options. There's only really one thing you need to do when swapping to a single chainring, and that's the chainring bolts. So the ones on the right here are the original ones, and these are designed for 2 chainrings. And they are longer than single ones. So you can see here, if you tried to use them, they poke too far through, so you wouldn't be able to tighten down the chainring properly. What you want is the chainring bolt to sit just below where the head of the nut would sit, like this one here. I'm just going to use these single speed ones as I already have some spare, but you can use the original ones if you cut them down or add spacers to the back. By the way, what do you guys think about this saddle? I got it recently and thought, given that it's yellow and black, it would be kind of rude not to put it on this build. The yellow has faded a bit, but I think I'm going to test it out. So moving on to the parts. So I've kept the original cranks, stem and seat post, and for the parts I've replaced, I've found these nice Netto B809 crossbars, which seem like they have a nice bit of rise and a little touch of back sweep. Some new grips, the flight saddle, definitely my favorite. I actually ended up buying an old mountain bike just for the saddle. Was super cheap though, so yeah, totally worth it, I think. And I've gone for a 17 tooth cog and a Dura Ace lock ring. For the pedals, I've gone for these more classic style MKS pedals with toe cages. as I thought they would match the build quite nicely. And the wheels, classic Novatec style hubs. I'm not actually sure of the brand, unfortunately, but a nice polished silver, and these are wrapped in some Vittoria Rando 28C tires. So now it's time to work out the spacing. First step is measuring the rear. These will usually be somewhere around 126 to 130 for this era road bike. This one looks to be 126. Now normal track and fixed gear hubs are usually 120mm, but it's always good just to double check. And yeah, looks like this is 120mm. So that means I'll need to space out the axle by 6mm. It's best to do it evenly so you don't have to redish the wheel, so I'm going to go 3mm on each side. So I've just found some washers and they look to be about spot on, so it's best to put them between the lock nuts. So I'll remove the outer lock nut, slide on that 3mm spacer, and then refit the lock nut. And then I've done that on both sides evenly, and now we can tighten up the lock nuts, and now we can measure it. Should be pretty spot on, and yeah, nice. And yeah, looks like it fits perfectly. So here is a tricky bit, but it is very important, and that's working out the chain line. So the first step is I'm going to measure the bottom bracket shell, and it looks like it's 68mm, which is pretty standard. So once I got that measurement, I can choose a bottom bracket, and I'm going to test fit this 113mm BB. This is the same length as the original bottom bracket, but a sealed bearing version. So I've just gently fitted the cranks, and now what I do is I look from the back, and you can see and line up the cogs. So it looks like the chainring is sitting quite far out to the right. If I was then to tighten the cranks down, it would bring it in a few millimeters, but probably not enough to get that in line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to test out a narrower bottom bracket, and I've got this 108mm one here, so that's a couple mil shorter on each side. So again, I've just loosely fitted the cranks. There's decent clearance on the drive side. It's a little bit tighter on the non-drive side. So yeah, one thing to note is if I did go any narrower, that non-drive side could get in contact with the chainstay. Looking from the back, it looks definitely better, and I think once I tighten the cranks down, it should be pretty good. So yeah, I think I'm happy with that. One other good tip is because this crankset is a double, I could actually fit the chainring on the inside, which would bring the chainring closer without changing the bottom brackets. But yeah, I'm personally not a big fan of the look. Here's a little look of what it looks like when it's on the outside of the chainring, and then this is what it's like on the inside of the chainring. So yeah, I'm definitely going to leave it on the outside. And there we go. So I've tightened that on now, and I'm pretty happy with that. It's definitely not perfect, but I think it's going to work fine. As long as there's no visible angle when you fit the chain and no chain noise, you should be pretty sweet. Crank clearance looks good as well. So yeah, I was just spinning the wheels and I could hear a bit of a noise, and yeah, sounds like there's some loose bearings or something inside the freewheel just rattling around. I'm not planning on using the freewheel, so I went to remove it, but then I realized it was one of those really cheap ones that doesn't even have a tool slot to remove it. It's got the two small holes for taking apart the actual freewheel body, but no tool slot to remove it. Very annoying. I've actually had to remove one of these in the past, and what I ended up doing was crushing it in a vise, and that managed to loosen it. But yeah, I don't really want to do that to this freewheel. This is what the tool slots usually look like on freewheels. There's a few different designs, but yeah, I can't believe they make these freewheels with no way to remove them. I guess I'll just have to leave it on for now. When it comes to this style of dropout, a lot of people tend to ask if it's safe for fixed gear, and in my personal experience, I've never had any issues running the setup. The main things I make sure that are right is that the axle is far enough in the dropouts, so the axles and the nut have full purchase on the dropout. If it was too far forward, it might not grip as well and it could cause issues. And then the other thing to note is your axle nuts. I make sure both the hub nut and axle nut both have these really nice nail grooves, as you can see here. You can get some that are much bigger like this one, which would most likely hold a lot better. Some cheaper hubs on road style hubs will have this style of hub nut, and you can see that it doesn't actually have any grooves, and it's also not much surface area. So yeah, try avoid those. And then when it comes to axle nuts like these ones here, they may look the same from the outside, but when you actually turn them around, you can see that one has nice grooves and the other is completely smooth. So yeah, always go for ones like this one here. So you can imagine how well these two groove nuts would actually hold onto the dropout once you've tightened them down. And then the last thing to mention is just tighten down the axle nuts nice and tight. The main reasons why axles tend to slip is because they aren't tight enough. But yeah, if you are really worried, you can always get a chain tensioner designed for this style of dropout. Certainly make some called the hurdy-gurdy. And last but not least, the titanium flight. And there we go, guys. So this is that stage where all that stuff that you've been thinking about, dreaming about for weeks or months finally comes together. And I don't know what it is, but it seems like 99% of the time, it always comes out looking way better than I'd originally imagined. There's just something about these old Peugeots that I just love, and I don't know if it's the fact that you can still pick them up pretty cheaply, or that most of them just have rad paint jobs. Either way, keen as to test this thing out. I don't think I've ever named a bike before, but I think in honor of that wasp it's necessary, so I think I'll call this build the Stinger. And for anyone interested, this build cost me just under 200 New Zealand dollars. I'll leave a cost breakdown in the description below. And yeah, if you guys have made it this far, thanks so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed this one. Let me know what you think. It's time to take this thing out for a rip. I'll catch you all on the next one. Peace.